The sky over Germany is a frozen battlefield. 28,000 feet above the clouds, the drone of heavy bombers echoes through thin air as a formation of American B-17s pushes deeper into enemy territory. Their engines roar like distant thunder, but inside the cockpit of a German fighter, something else cuts through the noise. A new sound. High-pitched, fast, closing quickly. The Luftwaffe pilot glances over his shoulder, and his stomach drops. Silver shapes are diving out of the sun. Not Spitfires. Not Thunderbolts. P-51 Mustangs. Their long wings slice through the cold air with terrifying speed. The polished aluminum glints like blades in the sunlight. In seconds, the calm sky erupts into chaos. Machine guns hammer, contrails twist into violent spirals, and the radio explodes with desperate German voices shouting warnings. Because by 1944, every Luftwaffe pilot knew one thing. If a Mustang appeared behind you, escape was almost impossible. It was faster at altitude. It could fly farther than anything in the sky. And its 6.50 caliber machine guns could shred a fighter in seconds. But what truly terrified German pilots wasn't just the aircraft. It was what the Mustang meant. For the first time in the war, American bombers could cross Germany with fighters that could escort them all the way in, and all the way home. And suddenly, the skies that once belonged to the Luftwaffe became the most dangerous place on Earth. This is the story of the fighter that changed the air war over Europe, and why German pilots came to fear the P-51 Mustang. The air is thin and brutally cold above the European continent. Frost creeps along the inside of cockpit glass as engines roar at full power. Far below, Germany stretches toward the horizon. Cities, factories, rail yards, and oil plants that keep Hitler's war machine alive. Above them, hundreds of American bombers hold formation. Massive B-17 flying fortresses move forward like steel islands in the sky, their propellers carving the thin air. Gunners scan the empty horizon through frozen sights. Everyone is waiting, because they know what usually happens next. German fighters. For years, Luftwaffe interceptors have climbed into these bomber streams like wolves attacking a herd. Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf 190s slash through the formations with heavy cannons blazing. One well-placed burst can tear open a bomber's wing or ignite a fuel tank. Crews have seen it too many times. Bombers spiraling down in flames. Parachutes drifting into hostile territory. Entire formations shattered in seconds. But today something is different. High above the bombers, nearly invisible against the sunlit sky, a new guardian waits. The P-51 Mustang. Its long laminar flow wings stretch gracefully through the air. The bubble canopy gives the pilot a clear view of the battlefield around him. Beneath the nose, the Merlin engine roars with a smooth, deadly power that few aircraft in the world can match. The Mustang doesn't just escort. It hunts. Suddenly the radio crackles. Bandits, 11 o'clock high. German fighters are climbing toward the bomber stream, confident, aggressive, ready to strike just as they have done countless times before. But before they can reach the bombers, something flashes above them. Silver shapes diving from the sun. Mustangs. They drop like falcons, engines screaming as speed builds past 400 miles per hour. The first burst of machine gun fire rips through the sky, tracers slicing across the thin air. A German fighter explodes into smoke. Another rolls violently to escape. Within seconds the attack has turned into chaos. Instead of helpless bombers, the Luftwaffe now faces something new. A fighter that can match them in speed, outrun them in pursuit, and follow them deeper into the sky than any escort before it. And worst of all, the Mustang never seems to leave. It can escort bombers all the way to Berlin, all the way to the heart of Germany, and then fly home again. For the first time since the war began, the Luftwaffe is no longer fighting tired bombers. They are fighting a predator built to dominate the sky. A fighter so fast, so deadly, and so relentless that German pilots soon learned to recognize it instantly. The long nose, the shimmering wings, and the terrifying sound of a Merlin engine closing in behind them. Because once a Mustang was on your tail, the sky itself had become the most dangerous place in the war. The crisis over Germany. By 1943, the Allied bombing campaign against Nazi Germany faced a brutal problem. American heavy bombers like the B-17 Flying Fortress and the B-24 Liberator were designed to fly deep into enemy territory and destroy factories, railways, and oil plants. But once they crossed into Germany, they were essentially alone. Early escort fighters simply didn't have the range. The P-47 Thunderbolt was powerful but fuel-hungry. The Spitfire was agile but built for shorter missions. Once the bombers flew beyond escort range, the Luftwaffe struck. German fighters, Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf 190s, swarmed the bomber formations. They attacked from head-on angles, dove through defensive gunfire, and used heavy cannons capable of tearing a bomber apart in seconds. The results were catastrophic. During the Schweinfurt-Regensburg missions of 1943, American bomber losses were so severe that some formations lost 20% of their aircraft in a single raid. Entire crews vanished in fire and smoke before reaching their targets. Without a long-range escort fighter, daylight bombing over Germany was becoming unsustainable. That's when the Mustang arrived. The Merlin transformation. The P-51 Mustang had actually been designed earlier in the war, but its true potential was unlocked by one crucial change: a new engine. Instead of the original Allison engine, engineers installed the Rolls-Royce Merlin, a supercharged powerhouse already famous for powering the British Spitfire. The results were extraordinary. The P-51D Mustang could reach speeds of around 440 miles per hour, making it one of the fastest piston engine fighters of the war. But speed was only part of the story. At high altitude, where bomber formations operated, the Merlin engine thrived. The Mustang could climb, accelerate, and maneuver with lethal efficiency in the thin air above Europe. And then there was its range. With drop tanks attached, the Mustang could escort bombers over 1,600 miles, deep into Germany and back. For the first time, Allied bombers were no longer alone. A predator in the sky. The Mustang carried a devastating punch. 6.50 caliber Browning machine guns, mounted in the wings, delivered a storm of bullets capable of shredding fighters or ripping through bomber interceptors. At close range, a Mustang pilot needed only a short burst. German aircraft that wandered into its sights often disintegrated under the concentrated fire. But what made the Mustang truly dangerous wasn't just firepower, it was versatility. It could climb with German fighters, dive faster than many of them, and thanks to its aerodynamic design, it maintained incredible speed during long pursuits. For Luftwaffe pilots, this meant something terrifying. Running away often didn't work. The escort revolution. By early 1944, Mustangs began escorting bomber formations deep into Nazi-controlled Europe. They flew ahead of the bombers, above them, and sometimes even far beyond them. Instead of staying tightly glued to bomber formations, Mustang pilots adopted aggressive tactics. They hunted. When German interceptors rose to attack American bombers, the Mustangs dove on them from above, turning the tables in seconds. Dogfights erupted miles away from the bombers themselves. For the Luftwaffe, the sky was no longer safe. A mission over Berlin. On March 6, 1944, American bombers launched a massive raid against Berlin itself, the heart of the Third Reich. Hundreds of B-17s and B-24s thundered toward the German capital. And this time they weren't alone. P-51 Mustangs escorted them across the entire distance. Luftwaffe fighters rose to intercept, confident as they had been many times before. But this time was different. Mustangs met them head-on. The sky above Germany exploded into violent swirling dogfights, high-speed dives, tight turns, and bursts of machine gun fire tearing through the clouds. German pilots quickly realized something chilling. The new American fighter could match them at every altitude, and it never seemed to run out of fuel. Fear in the Luftwaffe. German pilots soon began reporting the same problem. The Mustang was everywhere. It could appear suddenly out of the sun, dive through a formation, and climb away before defenders could react. Its long range allowed American pilots to patrol vast areas of airspace. Even after bomber formations had turned for home, Mustangs continued sweeping across German skies, attacking airfields, strafing fighters on the ground, and ambushing interceptors. Luftwaffe pilots began to dread the moment they spotted the sleek silhouette of the Mustang's long nose and bubble canopy. Because if a P-51 locked onto you, escape was unlikely. The strategic collapse. The Mustang's greatest impact wasn't just tactical, it was strategic. By destroying German fighters and protecting bomber formations, it helped the Allies cripple the Luftwaffe. Aircraft factories were bombed. Fuel plants were destroyed. Experienced German pilots, already difficult to replace, were shot down in growing numbers. Without air superiority, Germany's ability to defend its cities and armies began collapsing. By the time Allied forces launched the D-Day invasion in June 1944, the Luftwaffe was only a shadow of its former strength. And the Mustang had played a major role in that transformation. What made the Mustang especially terrifying to German pilots was how completely it changed the rules of aerial combat. Before its arrival, Luftwaffe interceptors could attack bomber formations, fire their cannons, and then dive away toward friendly territory. American escorts simply didn't have the fuel to chase them. The P-51 erased that advantage. With external drop tanks extending its range dramatically, Mustang pilots could pursue enemy fighters far beyond the bomber stream. German pilots who attempted to escape suddenly found American fighters still behind them, minutes later, sometimes even hundreds of miles from the original battle. Its speed at altitude allowed it to dictate the fight. If the Mustang wanted to engage, it could catch you. If it wanted to disengage, few aircraft could follow. This freedom of movement transformed escort missions into offensive patrols. And slowly, mission by mission, the Luftwaffe began losing control of its own skies. By the final year of the war, the skies over Europe had changed forever. Where German fighters once dominated, silver Mustangs now roamed freely across the continent. They escorted bombers. They hunted interceptors. They struck railways, convoys, and airfields. And every mission carried the same message to the Luftwaffe. The balance of power had shifted. German pilots who once attacked bomber formations with confidence now faced an enemy that could outrun them, outrange them, and often outfight them. Many veterans of the Luftwaffe later admitted the same truth. The arrival of the Mustang marked the moment the air war over Germany began to slip from their control. Because the P-51 didn't just defend bombers. It owned the sky around them. Factories that once seemed untouchable fell under relentless attack. Oil supplies vanished. Airfields were cratered. And slowly the Luftwaffe, the force that had once terrorized Europe, was ground down by constant combat. The Mustang became more than a fighter. It became a symbol. A symbol of long-range power, relentless escort, and the ability to carry the war directly into the enemy's homeland. Even today, the sleek silhouette of the P-51 Mustang remains one of the most recognizable aircraft ever built. Pilots who flew it remembered its smooth handling, its roaring Merlin engine, and the feeling of unmatched speed at altitude. But for German pilots in the final years of the war, that same sound meant something very different. The distant growl of a Merlin engine approaching from behind, a flash of silver in the sun, and the terrifying realization that the hunter in the sky was already closing in. Because when the P-51 Mustang arrived above Europe's battlefields, the Luftwaffe's days of dominance were already numbered. By late 1944, the war in the skies above Europe had reached a turning point. Factories burned across Germany. Oil fields were crippled. Rail lines and supply routes were constantly under attack. And almost everywhere Allied bombers flew, the P-51 Mustang flew with them. Sometimes above the formation. Sometimes miles ahead. Sometimes deep inside German territory, waiting for interceptors to rise from their airfields. For the Luftwaffe, every scramble became more dangerous than the last. Fuel shortages limited training for new pilots. Veteran aces who had survived years of combat suddenly faced waves of long-range Allied fighters that never seemed to run out of endurance. The Mustang made that possible. Its extraordinary range allowed the Allies to maintain fighter presence over Germany for hours at a time. Instead of brief clashes near bomber formations, the skies now hosted continuous patrols of American fighters hunting targets of opportunity. Airfields were strafed. Fighters were destroyed before they could even take off. Transport aircraft, trains, and supply convoys were attacked from the air. The Mustang had turned the entire European battlefield into contested airspace. But beyond its technical performance, the aircraft represented something deeper. A shift in momentum. The sleek fighter that once began as a rushed wartime design had evolved into one of the most effective air superiority machines ever built. Its combination of speed, range, firepower, and high-altitude performance gave Allied pilots an advantage that Germany struggled to counter. And as the war pushed toward its final months, the Mustang's presence became constant. Silver fighters escorting bombers over shattered cities. Mustangs sweeping low across rail yards and highways. Pilots watching the horizon for the familiar silhouette of long wings and a spinning propeller. For American airmen, the aircraft meant protection. For German pilots, it meant danger. Because the moment a Mustang appeared behind you, the odds of survival dropped dramatically. Even decades later, veterans of the Luftwaffe would remember that sound, the deep, unmistakable growl of the Merlin engine approaching through the thin air. A sound that often came just seconds before gunfire. The P-51 Mustang did more than escort bombers. It helped break the Luftwaffe's ability to defend the skies of Europe. And when the war finally ended, the legend of that silver fighter remained, an aircraft whose speed, reach, and relentless presence turned the tide of the air war. A machine that proved that sometimes victory in war begins not on the ground, but high above the clouds.